Economics Report. Time, Al Corlin. Appreciate you joining me. This program is being produced exclusively for my friends at Kitco. I got to tell you guys, you're in for a treat today. I have a brand new guest vis-a-vis Kitco with me right now, Grant Williams. Grant lives in Singapore. He writes what is, in my opinion, one of the most insightful newsletters out there. It's called Things That Make You Go, Kind of an interesting title, huh? But it's, as Grant says, it's a walk around the fringes of finance. I'll tell you, I've been reading this for an awful long time. My friend Laura Stein turned me onto it, and I think it is absolutely fantastic. Anyway, having said that, what you guys care about is what's going on in the markets right now, and that's what we're going to talk about. Grant and I are recording this at 8:30 Pacific Daylight Time this Tuesday. Grant, I want to get your comments on two things. Number one, gold popped back up again. As we're recording, it's up about $40. Silver also is up. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 41.59. It's interesting because the causative factor for what's going on in the metals markets right now is basically being rationalized by a headline on Kitco, which states COMEX gold trades near daily high on Fed governor remarks weak U.S. economic data. I think it's a hell of a lot more deep than that. What does Grant Williams think?
Yeah, Alan, look, I think I think every time there's a move in gold, and as we've seen recently, the moves seem to be getting sharper and more violent in both directions as this battle continues amongst the forces that want the gold price to stay in a containable range, and those who understand that what gold absolutely is not is a bubble at the moment, and it's also not a trade as such. You've suddenly got, along with an awful lot of captive jewelry demand, and we're just coming into the season where gold demand historically picks up tremendously going into the last quarter of the year. You've got the burgeoning ETF market, which the demand for gold for the ETF vehicles around the world is surging. But I think more importantly, you've now got a group of central banks around the world who have turned from net sellers of gold in the hundreds of tons to net buyers, and that's happened rather quickly. And I think the reason that gold has been so strong is more to do with it being a currency, or seen as a currency, certainly in the short to medium term, than it is as an investment and a trade. So I think what we're seeing here, we're seeing corrections which are absolutely healthy when you see something like gold running as hard as it has done. But also the speed with which gold recovers and turns around and starts to go up again suggests that on these downdrafts, the metal's moving into some very, very strong hands indeed, and that's going to cause a problem for any shorts out there.
Grant, what I find to be really interesting is about 3 years ago, I was speaking at a conference, about 5 years ago at a conference, and interestingly enough, that's about the time that the mainland Chinese, started to make a lot of noise about gold. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean, at that point, they began to encourage their citizens the federal government, I guess I should say, began encouraging the Chinese folks to save using gold and silver as the medium for that savings. A year later, a very interesting statistic came out, and that was that mainland China had usurped South Africa as the largest producer of gold in the world. Now today, China is, if I'm not mistaken, one of the largest importers of gold, in addition to being one of the largest producer of gold. They, along with the French, have been talking about a new international reserve currency, which is asset-based, and that asset would be gold. I find that to be absolutely fascinating. Gold is becoming a currency again.
Yeah, I think this is the key to what's happening at the moment, and the fundamental shift that's actually occurring. The beauty that the Chinese have is that ownership of gold here in Asia, and I've spent a considerable amount of time living in Asia in the last 20 odd years. Gold is absolutely people understand it, they own it, they've always owned it. It's been handed down through the generations as a store of wealth. So when the Chinese encourage their people to buy gold, they don't take an awful lot of encouraging. And I go to gold dealers here in Singapore, and you see that they do a roaring trade here. And so I think with China, you say 5 years ago, you were talking at the GATA conference, and I think it was 2009 when China last announced their gold reserves, and at that point they doubled from the previous time they announced them. But still, China only has 1.7% of its reserves held in gold bullion. And
right.
You compare that to the US, who have 83%, I think it is, of their reserves in gold bullion. bullion, and China's got a long way to go. So, there aren't many ounces, if any, that leave the country in China now. They're basically buying all their own domestic product, well as importing gold, as you previously said. Kazakhstan have just announced that starting in 2012, they're going to buy every ounce of domestic gold as well. So, you've got a bunch of Eastern countries who understand that gold is true wealth, who are absolutely intent on keeping as much as they possibly can and storing it internally, putting it into their central bank reserve. So, if you throw into the mix things like de Chavez's move last week to repatriate Venezuela's gold, which it certainly made the news, but I don't think enough was made of that in terms of the potential that could have to disrupt various corners of the gold market. He's whether he gets the gold or not, problems are going to start cascading down to other central banks. If there's a problem with actual possession of his gold, we're going to be told he can't have it back. And if the Western countries that have lawsuits pending against him that do have an interest in at least sequestering his gold as possible collateral against settlements, if they say no, you can't have it back for what they deem legitimate reasons, it's still going to set a lot of question marks above people's heads. And if I'm a central bank governor, I don't want to be the last guy who asks for his gold back, to be honest with you. So they have to be sitting there now thinking to themselves, well, maybe it wouldn't kill us to have it.
Maybe it would.
Safe, but we know.
Long story short, more bullish sentiment. Grant Williams, thank you so much, Grant. We're going to be back with you tomorrow.